Morning, guys. So let's get started. I'm going to turn the camera a little bit. You guys can see that. There we go. I will be able to explain how the U.S. used propaganda to raise public support for World War I. So obviously propaganda, it might be familiar, that term, to many of us, but propaganda is a relatively new term for a lot of us. Propaganda is just information, images, videos that promote, that send out a certain point of view. Information, images, videos that promote, that send out a certain point of view. Governments use propaganda all the time, especially when it comes to war. So obviously we've been studying World War I for the past couple of days. Yesterday we learned about two events that lead the US into World War I. Remember that World War I lasts from 1914 to 1918. At first, the US stays out of it. They stay neutral. But after yesterday's events, the sinking of the Lusitania, that cruise ship, and the Zimmerman telegram, the US decides to jump into this conflict. Quick review. Our two sides of the conflict are the Allied powers and the Central powers. On the Central power side, this map of the alliances is in your RTL. On the Central power side, we have Austria-Hungary, and the other big one is Germany. On the Allied power side, you have France, England, Russia, and eventually, in 1917, towards the end of the war, the US gets into this conflict. Now, when the US gets into this conflict, they're not super ready for it. Like, they were not ready to join World War I. So they need to raise support. They need to raise public support. They need to raise the people's support for the war so that people will join as soldiers, that people will join as nurses. Today, we need to learn how the US uses this, uses propaganda to raise support for World War I. So I've got a quick video I want to show you that gives you a visual of the experience of World War I, after which you're going to go straight into today's propaganda activity.
I think one really clear way of understanding the shift in World War I in terms of technology is that soldiers rode in on horses and they left in airplanes.
At the beginning of World War I, warfare is almost in the 19th century style. The French sincerely believe that going at the troops with determination and enemy troops is the way to go. What they don't understand is the collision of technologies.
General Pershing didn't believe in the trench warfare. He grew up on plains fighting in Indian warfare where it was an open concentration. So he trained his troops to fight in the open warfare. The British and French generals thought he was crazy. They criticized him for this.
It's impossible to cross that deadly beaten zone, the deadly zone between the two lines. The most determined line of soldiers cannot oppose a machine gun that fires hundreds of rounds a minute.
World War I wasn't just the first industrial war, it was also the first scientific war. It was the first time that societies had taken all of their resources of science and intelligence and said, how do we do this better? How do we fight better? How do we develop technologies?
A lot of the armaments you see in World War I had been used before: submarines, trench warfare, Gatling guns, machine guns. What happens during World War I is that these become mature and these become even more destructive.
During the war, the governments of all the different warring powers put enormous amounts of time and effort into scientific and technical development, so that the advancements, which would have happened anyway, happen at a much more rapid pace, and they happen according to the priorities of the warring powers.
Something happened in trench warfare that changed the course of the war and changed the way we understand warfare today, and that is chemical warfare.
The first gas attack, it was at a place called Vimy Ridge, and it was mostly Canadian soldiers who were being attacked. And the Canadian soldiers who were in the trenches saw this cloud of haze coming towards them. They had no gas masks. They had no equipment to protect them. Chlorine gas causes your lungs to fill with liquid. And so essentially you drown from the inside out. It was really the first war in which all of the technologies and science and industry of the 19th century were put to the sole purpose of killing people.
So this very destructive war is underway, and the US realizes, okay, well, we need to raise support for this war so that we have a fighting chance. Directions. Propaganda is information, images, or film used to spread a particular message, usually a misleading message. The questions are based on the documents in the leftmost column. Underneath each picture is a link to a PowerPoint that includes each image, as well as a description of the image. Go to this PowerPoint to see each document in greater detail. Then come back to this graphic organizer to answer the questions. So your job today is to figure out how the US uses propaganda. Again, it's information, those images, those films, to raise support for the war. Keep in mind that propaganda is often exaggerated, it's often misleading. So figure out how the US uses propaganda to raise support for the war. You are filling in your graphic organizer by first clicking on the link underneath each propaganda poster. This will bring you to a PowerPoint where you can see labeled versions of each image, as well as descriptions of the words or a context for each image. Based on the information in the PowerPoint images, you are completing each row of the graphic organizer.